2025 was a great year for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. Konami rolled out new pricing for their Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series premier events, introduced a new officially supported format in Genesis format, full art / frame break, and even serialized cards are on the horizon. They killed off Ultimate Time Wizard. Okay, for the most part, 2025 was pretty good for Yu-Gi-Oh! But why is Konami just now making all of these changes? Konami is a billion-dollar company that operates like a small indie startup. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is notoriously known as the worst card game for competitive pricing. All you need to know is that if you've ever seen the memes about offering air fryers for prizing at Yu-Gi-Oh! Events, yeah, they're real. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is also known as the game that has only one eternal format, and most other popular trading card games, both old and new, rolled out full art, alternate art, even serialized cards well before a game that's considered to be in one of the big three. So why now? Well, Konami's bottom line is hurting. And when the legal money printer slows down, Konami doesn't like that. Historically, Konami makes the biggest changes to the game when they feel their backs are to the wall, and this might be the biggest wall yet. Every year, we'll see videos with titles and thumbnails, as clickbaity as this video is, that says, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is dying, or some variant of that title. But for once, I think there's some merit to the statement or the question. Is Yu-Gi-Oh! Dying? I've always liked to argue that there are three main pillars that make up any TCG community: the casual players, the competitive players, and the collectors. Now, one player doesn't have to fall under one pillar. One person can be in multiple groups, so think of it more like a Venn diagram with overlapping characteristics. Let's start with the casual players. Yu-Gi-Oh! Historically was an extremely casual-friendly game, and if you ask people on the street today if they know about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game at all, they can usually reference Dark Magician, Blue Eyes White Dragon, Pot of Greed, maybe iconic characters like Yugi, Kaiba, Pegasus, but that's usually the extent of it. At one point, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a top 10 IP in the world in terms of overall gross sales. Just think about that. However, most casual players fell off at some point, whether it was an extremely toxic format, the game becoming too price prohibitive, the complexity accelerating to a level that was widely unappealing, or with new competition becoming stronger and stronger over the years, both in the form of TCGs or other forms of entertainment. The value proposition simply wasn't there anymore for casual players to stick around. And candidly, Konami hasn't done much to solve this problem. It's even gotten to the point that even investors have raised concerns in earnings calls regarding the difficulty in attracting new players to the game. Entry-level products such as the 2-player starter set were an attempt by Konami to wrangle new or previously invested players back into the game, but unfortunately, what they got was an essay-long rulebook / manga comic that was like ticking boxes on a checklist instead of actually teaching someone how to play the game, cards that are too complex even for beginners, missing pieces like the actual tokens. Oh wait, sorry. They included the tokens, you just had to physically cut the tokens out of the rulebook with a pair of scissors. Point being, this product failed to appeal not only to new players, but even players who had previously played before back into the game. This experience is perfectly exemplified in a recent encounter I had with a mother and her 10-year-old son. The mom posted in the local Facebook group that she was looking for someone to teach her son how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! She had purchased the recent Blue Eyes White Dragon structure deck for her son to learn how to play, but both the son and even the mom were so overwhelmed that they had no clue where to start. I decided to take up the mantle on this, and it was immediately apparent when we started playing our first duel that the son summoned Sage with Eyes of Blue and immediately suffered from choice paralysis, not knowing which card to search with the Sage's on-summon effect. Looking flustered from this first move of the game, I interjected and offered an alternative solution. Fortunately, I had brought a few modified GOAT format decks just in case something like this were to happen. For those unaware, GOAT format is a format that takes place under the April 2005 ban list, so most of the cards are ones that you may remember from the old days and have only about one line of text and are relatively simple to intuit once you understand some basic fundamentals about the game. What we boomers call real Yu-Gi-Oh! As soon as we started playing, it was an entirely different experience. The son knew some of the basics from watching the show and reading the rulebook from the structure deck, but it was as if all of a sudden something clicked, and we were able to play a full game to completion with very little coaching. Then another. Then another. Then the mom was getting into it and wanted to play as well, so the mom played the son. Then they played again, and again, and again. We were alternating between games until suddenly 6 hours had passed. I'd only planned on meeting them for an hour or two, but that experience just exemplifies how important the new player experience can be. Now, some of you newer modern players or longtime veterans might say, oh, that's not real Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not how we play the game today, and you're not wrong, but look at how a negative first impression turned into a positive one just with a simple shift in perspective. I mean, it's still Yu-Gi-Oh! You could also make the argument that Yu-Gi-Oh's target demographic has skewed older over the years, as most of us have aged alongside the development of the game, and my analytics would support that, but I suppose my retort to that would be, why should we alienate prospective players? Why don't we have multiple officially supported formats so that regardless of how you enjoy playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, you have an outlet to play, meet new people, and have an overall great experience? Well, introducing Genesis format. Tired of playing modern Yu-Gi-Oh? Do you yearn for the days where you could play your old cards that are stuck in a shoebox? Well, Genesis might be for you. Most cards are 0 points, but some cards can cap as high as 100, and as long as your deck is comprised of cards that total 100 points or less, you can compete in officially sanctioned Genesis tournaments at either your locals or even YCS level events. Miss playing Pot of Greed? You can play 3 copies in Genesis format. The point values are constantly being adjusted for balance purposes, and as new cards are released, they need to be balanced into the format as well. It also seems that Konami NA has full autonomy over this format, because we've received never-before-seen levels of communication regarding this new format, from blog posts discussing the format as a whole, what they feel might change in upcoming adjustments. The reception to all of this is overwhelmingly positive. Now you might ask yourself, doesn't this solve the issue of Yu-Gi-Oh! Being a one-format game? Well, can't Konami support other formats like this as well? Like more simple formats such as GOAT format or Edison format in a similar way and allow players to choose the way they prefer to play the game? Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Well, it could be, but there's another factor at play here: profitability. See, Konami used to support older formats with the Ultimate Time Wizard series of events, where players could play their favorite retro format. Edison format, a format centralized around the March 2010 ban list, is by far and away the most popular retro format and was given the most amount of attention. But other retro formats, such as GOAT format, Tengu format, Hat format, and any format you could think of, were supported at both the local level and even officially sanctioned events if you had enough people to form a small pod. But the question is, how does Konami profit from these events? If Konami hosts a 256-player Edison Ultimate Time Wizard at a YCS at $25 entry fee per person, that comes out to $6,400. Considering YCS tournaments are essentially loss leaders to promote the game and provide Konami with a nice hefty tax write-off, $6,400 is a drop in the bucket compared to card sales as a whole. Since Edison format, and by extension all of the other retro formats, are played using only old cards, most of the cards have already been printed, if not multiple times, in numerous different rarities. So acquiring them on the secondary market is a breeze. You can build a tier 1 Edison or GOAT deck for around $20 to $30 if you purchase the lowest rarity printing of each card. So how can Konami capitalize on this from a product perspective? Reprints! During the period that Ultimate Time Wizard events were officially sanctioned, Konami was reprinting many staple and popular retro format cards in newer, shinier rarities as a selling point for players to purchase these new sets. These sets weren't specifically dedicated to retro formats, but rather a giant reprint set as a whole containing cards from all throughout the game's history. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't like Magic the Gathering, where we can print new cards into a retro format. In fact, Konami once tried to change the rules of officially sanctioned Edison format tournaments to align with modern erratas of certain cards, because over time certain cards have been modified, and even the rulings from Edison format to today differ widely, so Konami wanted to update the format by using modern rulings, and the backlash was so overwhelmingly negative that Konami reverted their decision only a day later, actually unheard of. Implementing those changes would warp the format entirely to where it wouldn't even resemble the same game. For instance, Raiko, Lightsworn Hunter, wouldn't target, whereas it does target a card in Edison. Goyo Guardian, one of the most iconic synchro monsters, now requires an Earth Tuner, making it nearly unplayable in most decks. Not to mention, Priority is an older rule system that Edison is played under, but has been completely removed from modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Players don't want to play modified versions of their favorite retro formats. That's how these retro formats became popular in the first place. Not to mention, if players are flocking to the alternative way to play your game, maybe Konami needs to start asking the question of what's wrong with their current game to keep players around. So now that most of the retro cards have been reprinted, now what? Could those higher rarity reprints have possibly helped contribute to the sales of those reprint sets? Perhaps. But now, what does Konami do? They've already reprinted everything. What are they going to do? Reprint everything again? Unfortunately, this was most likely the largest contributing factor as to why Konami ended officially sanctioned support for retro formats. There just wasn't any money in it, or at least enough to affect the bottom line of a billion-dollar company. This tale is important for the next section of this video: reprints. Reprints, reprints, reprints. If there's one thing that Konami is actively praised or disparaged for, it's reprints. If you're unaware, Konami is notorious for its heavy-handed reprint policies. Most cards are reprinted within a year, if not sooner, and nothing is safe. As a result, collector value for new sets is essentially non-existent. You see those videos all over social media where people are clamoring over getting the next set of Pokemon or One Piece? Well, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the opposite problem, where our product is literally rotting on store shelves. Since the thesis of this video is asking a question about the future, it's important we take a step back to the past. Rising Rampage was released on July 26, 2019, and introduced the brand new Starlight Rare. This was an attempt to inject more value into sealed booster boxes by offering a new set of chase cards in each new set release. Appearing at a rate of roughly 1 in every 2 boxes, or 48 booster packs, there were 4 Starlight Rares per set. High-rarity chase versions of new cards printed within the same set. Shortly after, a 5th Starlight Rare was introduced as a legacy reprint of an old iconic Yu-Gi-Oh! Card that typically also bared some resemblance to the set it was printed in. It seemed like a glimmer of hope for the collectors who were wanting something more out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Product, since most cards were inevitably devalued due to Konami's heavy-handed reprint policies. However, in true Konami fashion, not even the brand new premium Starlight Rares were safe from the reprint machine. As part of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s 25th anniversary celebration, which felt like it lasted 3 years instead of 1, Konami designed yet another new rarity, the Quarter Century Secret Rare. Placed side by side next to a Starlight Rare, these two rarities look nearly identical. And of course, a handful of cards that were slated to be reprinted in this new rarity ultimately ended up being the most valuable Starlight Rares from the years past, immediately cratering the secondary market. If that weren't enough, these once high-end cards were also reprinted in 6 additional rarities in the same reprint set. Once again, the collectors got crushed. Now you might be asking yourself, is this necessarily a bad thing? Maybe I don't want our game to become Pokemon, where we either can't find product or have to pay 2 to 3x MSRP to be able to acquire it. And you're not wrong, but you have to think about the impact that these decisions have on the larger ecosystem when it comes to the TCG. All right, we have the market expert when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
What's good, Cimoooooooo's channel? I'm John Moore, aka House of Champs.
So why don't you go ahead and explain to everyone what exactly is going on when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! Product?
Yu-Gi-Oh! Product outside of very few niche products has been failing, and it has for an entire year. Not a quarter, not a couple of quarters, an entire year. Only Rarity Collection and a couple of unique starter decks have done well. And some people like to point to specific deck building sets that out the gate did well, but they've all fizzled out in terms of any secondary market traction, and they've rotted on shelves if the store didn't sell them in that opening week.
What's the explanation for that? Why is product rotting on shelves?
There's so many reasons, but for the quick checklist, basically in 2020, they changed all the ratios on products and how products worked. So deck building sets went from all foil deck building sets where you would get a ton of the cards and product felt fun to open, to choking out ratios. You get 3 ultra rares. And then in core sets, you went from 8 secret rares to 10 secret rares. It felt like a small bump, but actually what they did is they also upped the ultra rares from 10 to 14, and the super rares, now there's 26 a set. Half of the set is freaking holographic, making everything harder to pull to some degree. And also that means when you're buying a case, mathematically, there were short prints before on a couple cards. Now everything went to almost the old short print ratios, and everything became harder to pull. You mathematically could not pull a playset of every secret rare in an entire booster case that people used to spend $720 on.
All right, and if we're going to be talking about cards and the market, of course, we have to include the one and only Ruxen 34. Go ahead and introduce yourself, buddy.
I open a lot of packs in Yu-Gi-Oh! I really enjoy opening packs. I've opened thousands of packs for specific recent sets, trying to get, the best cards, complete the sets. So I do a lot when it comes to opening product, and even play a little bit as well, especially the old stuff.
You're also like the only pack opener for Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. I mean, Pokemon has you're the last remaining one, and you're hanging on by a thread, but you still managed to make a name for yourself, which is great. But I wanted to have you on because I wanted to talk about what has been happening to Yu-Gi-Oh product for the past several years? As someone who has opened thousands of packs and is very intimate with the market, I thought you'd have a unique perspective on this.
As you said, I'm barely hanging by a thread as an opener, because thanks to all of the recent product, I guess there has been some changes. There's been some negligence potentially. It's really getting hard to enjoy opening packs anymore. It used to be such a fun thing to do. Pretty much anybody liked opening a pack because there was something cool inside. There was something you could pull. Well, recently, over the last 5-ish years, probably 4 or 5 years, packs got less and less worth opening because, one, the product itself was completely invaluable. Almost every box you can open from Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not like a rarity collection set, which is a special high rarity set where everything's super blingy and shiny. The other boxes go for $30 to $40 for 24 packs. So you're looking at $1.50 a pack. So the product itself super cheap, which might sound good for an opener. Oh, great, you get to open it for really cheap. Well, the reason it's super cheap is there's nothing exciting to open. Like, the only people that are opening it to get cards for their meta decks. Now, a lot of these sets don't even have good cards to pull. Some of them do have a couple of nice cards you can grab, but you can just buy the single. You don't need to open 6 boxes to try to pull that 3 secret rares or whatever you want. And you're not going to get 3 secret rares out of 6 boxes anyway. You end up opening 12, you end up opening 18, and it's just not worth it for somebody who could just pick up the playset. So that crowd is kind of not into the sealed as much as they used to be. Then the crowd of collectors like myself, who just like to pull rare cards and search for cool looking cards. The cool looking factor has disappeared completely. There used to be a lot of cool rarities like Ultimate Rare, Ghost Rare, which had beautiful foiling on them, and they were very collectible when you pulled them. Even if they didn't have the craziest value, they still looked great. Well, they introduced a Starlight Rare, which was actually really awesome for a while. It was really hard to pull. It was 1 in 25 boxes. So if you ever got one, it felt extra special. It was insane. It was super shiny, which we didn't have anything that quite looked like that yet. It was like an extra secret rare, you could say. And it was really awesome. It was really cool for a few years, probably 3 years. They held up really strongly. Some cards reaching $1,500 for a copy because they were so hard to pull, and they were playable. And then there were some that were just collectibles, so they were hundreds of dollars. And they were like a new goal for people that were opening boxes. They had the goal to search for these new cards because they're super expensive and super collectible. Well, then Konami realizes just how popular these cards are, so they start printing this other rarity that wasn't the same rarity but looked a lot like it, called Quarter Century Secret Rare, that came out for the 25th anniversary. And they started reprinting those Starlight Rares as Quarter Century Secret Rares, and instead of the uniqueness and the coolness and the rareness that the Starlights had, they're the complete opposite. They're not unique because they look like the Starlight Rares. They're not rare because they started by making them fairly hard to pull, and as they went, they just made them easier and easier to pull, eventually putting them into Megatins, so you get one every single pack.
Then we also just have awful cashing in on their reprint choices for even the highest rarities to the lowest rarities. Like, example, Trishula had an import Starlight Rare, and for people that don't know, this is a card that should not have been in the set. They brought it back because it's super popular and gave it this high rarity. And then there's another high rarity called Quarter Century Secret Rare that just looks absolutely the same except for the name and a stamp. But if you have somebody that doesn't play Yu-Gi-Oh! And you're looking at these two different cards, that looks about the same to me. It's the same foil pattern. It's the same kind of prismatic square secret rarity glossed up all over the card. And so that one was way easier to get. And now it's going to get another Starlight with just the text no on it, or yes, or whatever they're putting on. And that's one of the more popular ones that's going to get re-waved. Yet here they go, just going with the same choices over and over again for high rarity, making a lot of the collectors leave. Cimoooooooo long term actually coined this, and I latched onto it because it's very true. There are 3 different things that make a Yu-Gi-Oh product great, and that's targeting collectors, players, and casuals. And when
okay, for the record, before you keep going, I did not tell him to say this, but I did say this earlier in the video. I just want to clarify, I did not prep him to say that. So go on. Go on.
You did coin this phrase,
I
actually
did.
took it immediately because it's so true, and I've used it for a long time. When you get all three of those together in a product, that usually makes for the perfect product to sell, because you give something to the top-end, you give something to the person that just kind of checks in on Yu-Gi-Oh! Product, and then you give something to the player base, and the player base often is another huge driver in secondary market, like for a set, and a set selling, and people wanting to play those good decks and follow those top players. And now that's the only backbone that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has. It's all on the meta. It's all on who's playing what. It's all on that, because the collectability of the game has slid so downhill because they just keep doing it. Now, a lot of people say collecting is dead. It is not dead. There's still people buying up stuff and going in. Like, I brought up this card so many times, Silent Magician level 8, just almost doubled in price over time. I have my one for my collection. I'm not trying to resell any, but that's an example of a card that was just grossly undervalued. And some people are still checking in and collecting, but that's a 1 per every 2 case card from the final duel of the DM era, and it's selling for $22. A card like that used to would have gone for 200 plus. Now it's 1/10 of the power that it should be. And then the other two things, let's be real, they print way too much Yu-Gi-Oh! Product. There's a Yu-Gi-Oh! Set every freaking 3 weeks, and that really drowns out their choices for reprints. And then there's no current running anime. They even ended Rush Duel over in Japan, and they're not running that anymore. There's the Chronicles thing, which is shorts. They're like what Pokemon has and puts out on their YouTube channel, but they can only put out so many of those, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Does it at the pace of a snail comparatively. Like, there's so many heartstring ones for Pokemon, and then they have a running anime, and then they have so many things. But Pokemon is the biggest merch company in the world. It's kind of apples to oranges when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! But Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a top 25. They have the money to put into things, and Konami chooses to often draw from it and put it elsewhere. If you look at Master Duel's profit, based on what Square Enix actually says about them in a report, they say that Master Duel is likely 96% profit, yet they just choose to go put that into other games and not reinvest it back into Yu-Gi-Oh! It is crazy.
So, now that we've discussed this, what are the long-term implications and consequences of what's been happening for the past several years? I want you to walk us through sort of like the food chain of how it works as like a store owner and what we're seeing as the result of that.
Well, it's really bad for store owners, and I have seen several stores that have completely dropped it. I've seen some that say they're thinking about dropping it, because when you buy from a distributor, there's a misconception that store owners get to buy it at a very low percentage. It's not actually true. Distributors charge those store owners a high percentage. It's like 70, 80, 90%. I don't know the exact numbers because I'm not a store owner, but they're paying almost the full MSRP of the box. And when it comes out and it's then worth half the MSRP, the store owner loses that much money. And you might think, well, just don't buy that box if you know it's going to be bad. That's not how it works with these pre-orders. They have to pre-order just like we do with pre-orders. They have to tell the distributor 6 months-ish ahead of time, I'm interested in that set, when all they have to go on is the name of the set and maybe a 1 or 2 leaks. Maybe, if they're lucky. So they're pretty much guessing based on the past history of other sets, how much they want. And you can go, okay, we'll just try to order every once in a while. Another problem is with a distributor, if they see you're only going to order sometimes, you're an inconsistent orderer, they're going to lower your allocation. They're going to give you less boxes when you actually do put in an order. So eventually you just get squeezed out from using that distributor. So you, as a Yu-Gi-Oh store or Yu-Gi-Oh vendor or whatever, somebody who has a brick and mortar, you have to decide, I'm either taking a big L on most of the products for Yu-Gi-Oh in order to stock Yu-Gi-Oh, or I'm just not ordering Yu-Gi-Oh. That's the choices you have to make. So a lot of people are making the choice of, I've got Pokemon over here, which I'm going to make money on. I've got One Piece. I'm going to make money on that. People are coming in for it. Yu-Gi-Oh, I'm literally losing money when I place the order. I lose thousands of dollars depending on how much I order. So it's just not very attractive. As a business owner, it doesn't matter if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh fan or if you... Really, the people I hear that are still doing it is because they have a Yu-Gi-Oh community. They have people that are coming into the store looking for Yu-Gi-Oh specifically. So they're stocking it and they're taking that L just to keep that community there and keep them in the store and, you know, just support their local scene, not to make money because they're never making money on the new product.
They have to spend around 58 Well, that's the old number, yeah. It's $56 to $58 a box, I believe, depending on the amount they order, and sometimes it's $60. But they have to go to distribution and be like, I want to place my order, or they have to go through Konami directly and say, I want to place my order, and Konami usually charges a little more, and distro usually has extra rewards. I've heard a lot of people are actually reneging on their orders with distributions, leaving the distro now to hang out to dry on Yu-Gi-Oh! Even, and go to other vendors, specifically with the Charmer Structured X. Hey, I will give you this 40% off of the price we got it at because we have so many and we see that it's failing. And that's another example of them ruining a line of Structured X out the gate. The first Chronicle Structured X did great with Albaz, meta warping card within the archetype, and having so many good reprints. You go to the Charmer one and they're like, let's slap the horror stuff in there. People like that, and not really doing enough staples, and it not even changing the game in Genesis. So when we look at that, like, they keep doing that with different lines of products where the first one's a banger and they don't even repeat it like Maven's, or they just go in the line and they ruin it with the next one, like Ghost from the Past to Ghost from the Past 2. Whenever it feels like they've got some lightning in the bottle, it just fizzles out so quickly and they try to cash in on it. Almost happened to Rarity Collection. A lot of people don't remember. Rarity Collection 2 failed.
Yeah.
Flopped on its face.
Yeah.
It's still selling for a loss, and it's all because of Konami's greed. They tried to sell it at double the cards for double the MSRP, and nobody in the Yu-Gi-Oh community wanted to swallow that pill on price point. And they like Rarity 3 and 4, even though they're spending more per card on that. And sorry for slurring my words, but I am very passionate about this, so I get really ramped up about it, because I've had so many people, friends with stores that do this for their living, and I used to do this for my living before I switched to YouTube and stopped doing it, because YouTube was so successful for me and streaming was, that I didn't have to rely on it anymore, and I didn't even have time for it. At this point, I got out at the right time in a lot of senses, because I would have had so many high-end modern cards that just flopped on their face, and so their inventory is down. What they're paying for is constantly at losses. It's just not good for stores.
I was about to say, that was going to be my next question to you. How do you feel like the full arts are going to change the formula here, if at all?
It's hard to know right now, because all we know is that there will be those extended border cards, and there probably will be Grandmaster Rare, which is a serialized rarity. That's probably going to happen. Now, that in and of itself can't just fix the supply chain and how they're doing this and how they're reprinting stuff. Like, if they come out with these extended overframe cards, and then they, the next set, they just reprint them again in the same card, and then the cards, they lose the value of any sort of collectability, any sort of faith that their card that they get is actually going to, be worth anything. If they just reprint it and it's like, okay, well, you know how I really liked Starlights before. It was great. I had them for a few years. They were awesome to collect, and then they got cratered and I lost all faith in Konami. Well, people are still dealing with that. They're dealing with just trust issues with Konami. It's like, can I trust them to get these overframe cards? And if Konami proves that, okay, these overframe cards are going to be collectible, they're going to be valuable. And the thing is, they're doing them in ultra and secret rare, so they're probably not going to be that valuable. That's the thing. The Grandmaster Rare with the 100 each or whatever, if that comes out, those will be valuable, but so few people will have them. Will it be too niche for it to even matter? It'll probably help the boxes sell, because, you could get a 1 in 100 card worth 20 grand or something like that. But if you don't get them, you get the other overframe cards. Will those be enough? That's the question. Will they be cool enough to sell the set as well? I think that the Grandmaster thing is going to sell the product initially, and we'll see if that can be enough to just drag it. I really hope that they take some ideas of maybe tinkering the formula as well as those cool high rarity cards, and maybe they can reacquire those collectors, bring faith back to the collector. But after several years of just getting punched in the face, a lot of collectors are just out on Yu-Gi-Oh!
So what a lot of people aren't thinking about, and I've already been saying for a while, the 25th promotion was so long that the 30th anniversary promotion is around the corner. Japan loves to run these kind of promotions for about 2 to 2.5 years for everything because they sell so well, and usually that's cashing in. And I am very scared that with the extended arts, Konami is not going to resist, and they're going to end up re-waving those arts instead of breaking and making brand new ones for those, like the brand new Blue Eyes. I do not want to see that in a tin and it's full art. They're already making other versions that you can access to play. The system they're making initially is very good, but if they can't resist temptation and they go back in and they dip in to sell other products with it instead of making a brand new full art for this card, and even that still competes with it to some degree, but is much, much better than what would happen, then we have a huge problem, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Will be at a point of no return other than I think they have a couple bullets in the chamber of cycling sets or actually trying to like relaunch the game in a different form or fashion. But I think they would try cycling sets first, which just isn't Yu-Gi-Oh! It's so cool when you have these cards that did nothing before. A random vanilla is suddenly meta. People are playing vanilla in certain decks. That's so fun thanks to Primite and other things. Like, it's so cool when they make cards that go back, and this has been happening for ages. Look at Dino Rabbit, and Sabersaurus is suddenly coming out with Caboozles. Like, this has been a Yu-Gi-Oh! Mainstay, and when you kind of would take away that charm of being able to reach back unless Konami makes a reprint of something, it just wouldn't feel Yu-Gi-Oh! In many, many aspects, and you'll cut off even more of an already really walking away both player base and store base. And that's the main problem also, is stores are the lifeblood of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's where we play the game. And with so many taking hit after hit after hit and starting to walk away right before a rarity collection, like, it's a really bad sign because so many were placing their orders trying to hold in for rarity collection. And without those extended arts, I was already saying this rarity collection will fail without them, because if you go to the description page, all but 2 of the cards they've mentioned already had a high rarity between OTS packs like Chaos Angel and Fenrir, or Trishula, like I mentioned, already has a Starlight and a QCR. So does Zeus. I think Zeus has 3 of them already between QCR and Ultra Art Starlights and stuff. Like, they're just doing the same high rarities, and that is another problem. It'll get worse before it gets better, because Mirror Jade is one of the most collectible Starlight / QCR cards already, and it's going to get that extended art because it's already been announced in the OCG, and that will likely have a Starlight version because all these extended arts in the OCG are getting Starlights as well. So you're getting a higher rarity Starlight than one already used to sell a set. So it will get worse before it gets better. But, like, they're trying to set the new standard, and they have to not ruin the new standard as they have with every rarity. And I actually want to go back in time to how they turned around Ultimate Rares, which they've now driven into the ground once again. Ultimate Rares, they used to actually be over-romanticized. You have Shadows and Shadow Construct, right? When it was out, it was only $4 more for a first edition Ultimate Rare while it was meta. When
precious.
Billy won his event, Construct was $24 for an Ultra and $28 for an Ultimate Rare.
Insane.
Right when Billy won.
Insane.
And so people now, like, when COVID happened and people were going to past formats and things were coming back in, Construct Ulti as a collectible went to $100 and, like, just had a $75 gap again versus, like, the Ultra. It's stuff like that that has really left as a lot of the modern collectors have gone away.
For someone who might pose the question to you, I'm more of a casual player. I like that everything is really cheap. Why does this affect me? Why is this an issue in the macro sense that this matters? Because to me, if everything's being reprinted into the ground, the cards are really cheap, I can afford to. I think that's, you know, one of the takeaways out of 2025 is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is probably at one of its cheapest points in the game's history to pick it up. There's some exceptions to that, but for the most part, I would say that's probably the case. And so what would your response be to anyone with that sort of knee-jerk reaction? Because I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few of those in the comments.
This is the biggest comment I see about this. It's like, why are you complaining cards are cheap? Which, in theory, if you're playing right now and you're just acquiring decks and it's you, why should you care? I mean, don't care. I mean, you get to have your cheap decks. It's great. The problem is if you want to keep playing this game for a long time, like if you just care about it for 6 months, you're going to be fine. You're going to have a cheap deck. You're going to enjoy it. But the Yu-Gi-Oh card game might not last a few more years at this current rate because the cards are so cheap. Now, I'm not saying we want expensive decks. Like there's a balance where you can have these cheap decks that are existing right now and also have a high rarity chase. Like I was just looking at Pokemon the other day, which I know the TCG is a little bit different for Pokemon, but there's like 2 cards in Phantasmal Flames or whatever it's called that are over $100. There's like 2 big Charizards and then it drops all the way to $38. And then everything else down there is like 15, 10, 5, like, and that set's still, you know, really popular. Like people are buying it. There's a couple of cards that are expensive. They're just collector cards. There's a low rarity of the cards. Like you don't actually have to have every card be expensive for a set to do well, right?
Yeah.
You can have these Yu-Gi-Oh sets with a couple of chase cards, which I'm hoping those Grandmasters are able to do it. They are so limited though. I'm curious to see how that's going to factor in. But you can just have a couple of chases in there and the rest of the cards, like the lowest rarity, even some of the middle rarity can be cheap and you can still play your deck and it can still keep that box price up. And then people will say, well, I don't want my boxes to be expensive. And it's like, yeah, I get it. You want to open boxes for cheap. It's great. It just is not long-term sustainable. As I was talking about earlier with the stores, they're making that decision to lose money. And as a business, you can only do that for so long. And the reason they can do that, a lot of them right now, is because Pokemon and One Piece are carrying. Like One Piece and Pokemon are making them so much money, they can afford to take that loss in the Yu-Gi-Oh space to keep the Yu-Gi-Oh players there. Now, what happens if everything goes down? Because guess what? This is card games. When something real happens and the market goes down and Pokemon's not, you know, $1 billion a box and you're just automatically making money with your allocation and One Piece is not like in a huge bubble or whatever, which I don't get carried away, One Piece fans. I mean, it might be real. Who knows? But all of this isn't just going to be like insane all the time. Like at some point, Pokemon, One Piece, and Yu-Gi-Oh will all be down, and those shop owners are going to have to make a decision. Which one do I cut? Probably the one that's been losing me money for years, and now that everything's down even more, it's down like in the tank. As soon as they start cutting it, your cheap deck's great, but nobody's playing Yu-Gi-Oh anymore. So like you don't have a deck. Like there are no tournaments. Konami stops running tournaments. They're like, why would we run a tournament? Nobody buys our product. We lose money on these tournaments anyway most of the time. So, all right, no more YCSs. Oh, locals are cut out. Okay, I guess you can just play on Master Duel. So it doesn't matter that your cards are cheap because you're not using them anymore. So there's a long-term consequence that could happen down the road if we continue down this path of the last couple years.
The people taking all the losses are the store owners. Konami still sees its profit margins and doesn't lose out. The players get cheaper cards, but if the stores take all the losses, you're not going to have stores to play at, and there's not going to be communities in person anymore, and that's what makes a trading card game. You can have the not paper version. You can have Master Duel, but if you want to go to a local, shuffle up, talk to somebody about the game you love, and play for prizes like in person, you're not going to have that anymore unless it's hosted directly by Konami, and you can't have that as a sustainable model for a card game, and your card game will die without the stores.
Yu-Gi-Oh sets having negative value on release for store owners creates a vicious cycle of store owner takes a loss on a product before it even legally circulates. Even at reduced prices, products just sit on shelves. Store owners get frustrated with getting burned time and time again. Store owners stop carrying Yu-Gi-Oh! Store owners stop hosting local Yu-Gi-Oh! Events. Players no longer have anywhere to play in person. Players stop buying product and either move online to Master Duel or a completely different hobby entirely, whether it be a different TCG or not. All of these barriers make it increasingly difficult for both casual players and collectors to either enter or maintain being part of the wider Yu-Gi-Oh! Community. But what about competitive players? Several competitive players have also moved out of Yu-Gi-Oh! For one reason or another, and it's not like there isn't strong competition in just the TCG space alone. Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, One Piece, even the current Disney Lorcana World Champion is an ex-pro Yu-Gi-Oh! Player that I've done a video with on my channel almost a decade ago. So what's Konami's response to all of this? Well, new prizing was introduced for making Day 2 and top cut of YCS level events in the form of exclusive stamped promo cards or promo card packs, in addition to the prizing that was already offered. A new lower-powered officially sanctioned format in Genesis format that allows low-powered archetypes to be viable, helping sell new product as the result of Tier 2 and below archetypes now being viable in a competitive setting, whereas before about 95%, if not more, of most Yu-Gi-Oh! Products were considered bulk. And of course, we can't forget about what's most likely on the thumbnail of this video, the full arts. Full art cards aren't exclusive to Yu-Gi-Oh! In fact, almost every other card game has had full arts in some way, shape, or form. So why has it taken Yu-Gi-Oh! So long to follow suit? Sales pressure. Konami needs a surefire way to reinstill confidence in their product so that there's a reason to buy it. And this is their answer. Full art, frame-breaking cards featuring some of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s most iconic cards throughout the game's history. Konami is once again feeding the casual players the member berries in the best way possible, while also appealing to competitive players and collectors alike. They're even going so far as to include serialized versions of these cards to really win back their collector audience, as if to say, no matter how many times we reprint these cards, there will always only be 100 Grandmaster rares of this one card in circulation. And now we circle back to the question I posed as the title of this video. Is it too late to save Yu-Gi-Oh? If you're into Yu-Gi-Oh and the YouTube algorithm does its job, you may have been shown videos like this. Store owners who are exhausted from the rug constantly being pulled out from underneath them, and as a result, they no longer support the game we know and love.
Why am I paying $60 at distro and then a month later the box is $40 on TCG Player? How is that even possible? What type of mismanagement are we doing to where we are able to just not get it right? Konami, you got to do better. You have to do something. I can't keep losing money on these sets. Not for an entire year. I can't keep losing money carrying your game.
While maintaining their anonymity, I've heard from multiple sources that demand for Yu-Gi-Oh! From distributors is at an all-time low, and the average order for Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one single case. One single case. And can you really blame them? I mean, if that doesn't light a fire under the asses of Konami executives to make sweeping changes, then I don't know what will. While the future looks optimistic, it's Konami's responsibility to continue making these improvements to keep us enfranchised in their IP. It's not 2003 anymore. There's more competition than just Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. The anime that got people hooked on Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a relic of a bygone era where YouTube and smartphones didn't even exist. As someone who's played Yu-Gi-Oh! Since its inception, I know that when Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at its peak, no other game compares. And while the game we know and love has metamorphosized into what I've coined the fighting game of card games, sure, it still satisfies a core audience, but it doesn't have to be the only way for people to enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially at an officially sanctioned level. At the time of recording this video, I've noticed that countless friends and acquaintances have slowly begun to distance themselves from the game, if they haven't already, and I'm putting myself in that category. And so I've sort of begun to ask myself the question, why now? What changed? And why so many of us at once? And if you feel like you're also in this camp, I'd love to hear from your thoughts down in the comments below, because I don't think this is a coincidence. At the end of the day, I just hope it's not too late for Yu-Gi-Oh!